Our lease on a part very important of the estate of Colin McPhee, Wijaya, which is now Taman Bebek, comes to an end on the 15th of July. And someone else is starting. This should not mean that the property should be destroyed and make way for another villa. It's not about whose ownership it is. It is about the collective memory and the collective meaning that the property has. And it shouldn't matter whose ownership it is. If we can sit down and discuss this through between the different parts, we should be able to reach an agreement where the property can hopefully last another 100 years and keep, and actually enhance its values and enhance everything that it has to offer. Taman Bebek is not just Wijaya's favorite place on the island and its place to host all his celebrity friends who were coming and whatnot. Taman Bebek is also a historical property that was initially created by Colin McPhee and Jane Bello in the 1930s. Colin McPhee was a Canadian ethnomusicologist, right? He arrived here with his wife, Jane Bello, who was a visual anthropologist, or she was an early visual anthropologist. Together, they lived here from 1930-31 until 1939. They leased the land where we're sitting now in 1931 for 10 years, and they built a house. Was still contacted after he left during the 50s and 60s by the families of Bali as an ambassador of Bali. And so he really kept a close relationship with Bali, and he died of sorrow. He never came back. He passed away in sorrow, sadness, and alcohol in the 60s in New York. This is a typical Wijaya kind of game that he would do. He would use very bright colors in the interiors because sometimes at the ridge properties here in Sayan, it can get very dark at night and it can get very kind of gloomy. So he used to like to contrast sort of the quiet and the darkness of the outsides with bright colors in the inside. So he would, very Wijaya, he would have this game. This is actually the bedroom of Colin McPhee and Jane Bello. And this is where Margaret Mead and Gregory Bateson, who were the anthropologists who came in Bali, they would stay here. When not in Champuhan, they would stay here. These rooms are kind of the architectural experiments of back in the days. Wijaya, originally Michael White, arrived to Bali from Australia in his late 20s, right? Now we're talking about the 70s. So he arrives here, and Wijaya was always with his cameraman, his writer.
Guerrilla style.
More a Dogma 95 or whatever, like guerrilla style. He would go with his camera. Wijaya was an empirical, if you want, anthropologist, architect, a landscape designer, a journalist, photographer. Really, you would define him like a Renaissance man, a man of all trades. He could do all these different things. And fortunately, he was also very neat about his archive. So he also had an archivist vein. So that archive also sits nowadays with Taman Bebek, right? So Taman Bebek as a property connects two periods of history that were well documented and well archived. When Jeffrey Bawa came to design the Hyatt Hotel, Wijaya, Michael White back then, he got his first landscaping gig, the big one. And he created the gardens. And by creating the gardens, he not only got influenced architecturally by Jeffrey Bawa, but he really created a new style of tropical landscape design. He started creating a reinvention of the Balinese garden into something that was come to known as tropical landscape design. This pool was made by Wijaya, and the grounds were worked on the property following the original plans of Colin McPhee that were designed by Walter Spies. So the layout is very flowy and is as much about the gardens as it is about the villas. This is the weekend house of Wijaya. He originally built it in the late 1970s as his weekend getaway. This is a place that has, if the walls could speak, I guess it could tell you a lot of stories. A lot of the antiques that we have in this room and across the whole property are some of the first antiques that he started buying and collecting. So there's a lot of different islands of Indonesia. He was traveling around the archipelago at the time and sort of putting pieces together here. I remember Made telling me that, this is, and not only remember, I still get messages from a lot of the people that he worked with, Annie Kelly and 10th Street Porter, the photographer, and they say this is their very favorite table in the world where they sit for coffee here. Yoko Ono used to love the downstairs floor as well. She used to be also, when she came to Bali, she stayed here up in the mountain in Sayan. Francis Ford Coppola, Mick Jagger, David Bowie, all of them spent time at Taman Bebek and got influenced by Balinese culture through Made Wijaya and other hosts that were at the time introducing them to the cultures. One day, when we had moved to Bali, we had been looking for a house. And so that night I went back home and I told Rita, I think I found a place. There's...
What do you mean? I said, I found the house. And it was like, wow. And it's like Jeffrey Bauer house. And so we eventually ended up calling Made, and we said we really, really, really love Taman Bebek, and we would love to, it kind of need attention and love, and we would love to do that if you allow us, right?
But at some point, and very advanced as we were starting, Made found out that he was ill, and he had to start going and spending much more time in Australia. So at that time, he asked us if, should anything happen, if, we would consider taking care of Taman Bebek. This is Villa Malay. This is actually inspired on the Malayu houses that are lifted from the ground, for flooding reasons. There was also, happens to be also the favorite villa of Francis Ford Coppola, who used to stay here often. And he commissioned Made Wijaya to create a hotel in Belize called the Turtles Inn, inspired precisely on this villa, and just the surrounding of all the greenery throughout all the windows. This tree is only 40 years old. You can get an idea of how things grow in Bali, my age. And his father, the father of this tree, was this giant tree that got fed a bicycle, the Bible, a Quran, and everything had just gone up. And so you had this Dutch bicycle on the top and whatnot. Anyway, this is my favorite spot here in the property. This is the original kitchen from Colin McPhee times, and this has been on since, and this is where we get our food out. This is where we do our dinners under the tree, and I think this is the spot that has all the secret ingredients. I think this is the heart and soul of the property. In a way, I think what's happening in Taman Bebek at the moment, really, it's symbol, if you may, or somehow it captures of what's really going on the island on a larger scale. It's around that time, post-pandemic, that we found out that someone had put an offer on one of the leases that we were still negotiating at the time. We had been negotiating for a couple of years, and it's a lease that it's very inconveniently located in the back of our property. It's landlocked, and so therefore we took our time to negotiate and come to a nice agreement with the landowners. However, someone who is committed or completely decided to build his villa on top has managed his way to work out to acquire that lease. What that means is that within a very short period of time, I'm talking about a couple of weeks, less, this will have to taken down, and the land will have to be given in order to make way for a villa to be built. It's a sad ending to something that's been happening for 100 years, that it could happen for another 100 years if we manage to save this property jointly with all stakeholders, with all the people involved, right? It will take a lot of will from all parts to actually understand what is the value of Taman Bebek. And it's not just another little property in Sayan, it's a place that, weaves the stories through 100 years. Now, more than 1,000 people that have signed the petition can agree on. It's not about whose ownership it is. It's about the collective memory and the collective meaning that the property has for Balinese, Indonesians, longtime residents on the island, and internationally as well.